kindly take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monica, for introducing me. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my views on such an auspicious day, that is International Women's Day. I thank Professor Yugal Kishorji for giving me this opportunity and thought fit to be a speaker for this occasion. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you, Prachi, for giving me all the links and the minute to minute program, everything in organizing this webinar that is on the International Women's Day. So, since morning, it's the time for celebration for the women. And so far as the International Women's Day is concerned, we are celebrating it on March 8th every year. But before delving to the topic, that is gender justice and gender equity, I would like to give some introduction as to when and how this International Women's Day has been started to be commemorated on this particular date. So it is having a very, very long history, and we can say it is almost of 1 century old history of this Women's Day, and it was started somewhere in 1908 in the United States by the Socialist Party. And then since 1920, you see, it has been started to be celebrated annually by the communist parties, first in Soviet Union and then in China. At United Nations level, it was in 1975, March 8th, that was proclaimed by the United Nations a day for the women's right and international peace. And since 1977, this day is being commemorated as International Women's Day. Now, landing to India, we see that there are also certain movements and campaigns, etc., for gathering and for women rights, and that in India we started to commemorate this International Women's Day from 1980 regularly. You see, so since 1980, every year we commemorate this International Women's Day on 8th March. We see that in 1995 there was Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which set the agenda for realizing women's right. Though I'm of the opinion, and everybody must be with me and agreeing with me, that women being a person, so all the rights of the human being are the rights of the women also. And there is nothing like women's right and simply all the human rights, because this program is being organized by the Center of Human Rights. So they must agree with me that there is nothing like women's right. All the human rights are available to the human being, and women being human, those rights are also available to the women also. And for this year, the theme, as rightly observed by Professor Yugal Kishorji, that choose to challenge. And with that, the United Nations has also thrown the theme for this 21, that is women in leadership, achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 war. Because we all are aware as to how, and this entire year, this previous year has been with the COVID pandemic, and we were all in lockdown. There was a great crisis of the COVID pandemic, and how we have to see that the equality may be meted out in the future, by particularly by the women, because they are the persons who are performing the dual responsibilities, also being working women. So this International Women's Day, it is celebrated worldwide, and it is the story of the struggles and their achievements of the women. And the topic which has been allotted to me, that is gender justice and gender equity. So the very first question before proceeding further is that what is gender? What is sex? Or both are the same? They are different. And by gender, what we mean? Okay. So this is how we have to see that by gender we mean only the women, or we mean someone else. This is how we would start with this question: what is sex and what is gender? Now, so far as sex is concerned, we know that sex is a biological term, and it represents the genetic and physical identity of the person. It is meant to signify that one is either a male or a female. So it's a biological construct. And the laws, particularly the Constitution of India, you see that prohibits any discrimination on the ground of sex. So it's a biological construct. Secondly, when we talk about the gender, then gender is defined as the socially learned behaviors and expectations, and that are associated with the men and women, masculinity and femininity. Now, after this Navtesh Singh Jauhar case, though that third gender was always there, but the rights were not made available to those transgenders or the third gender. So, if we talk about the gender, then it's a man, the first gender, the woman is considered to be the second gender, and the third gender is the other persons who are not coming in the category of man and women. So, here we see that gender is a social construct. Sex is a biological construct while gender is a social construct. And gender stands for the characteristics of the men and women, which are socially determined rather than biologically identified. So it determines the social role of the male or the female, access to the opportunities which are made available to the male and the female, the entitlement of the resources for these two categories of the persons, that is the gender, and that is also builds the cultural implications upon them. As I told you that gender is a social construct, or rather socio cultural construct. So all these implications are also determining factor that this is a gender. And in practice, we see that gender generates basis in favor of men and against the women in relation to work, sharing of benefits, enjoying of the human rights, and following of the traditions. So this is something which is there in extant in the society. We have many laws, we have various other provisions which speaks about the equality, but we see that the social construct on gender, that is against the women, and that are various will causes for that going to be against the women. Now, when we talk about the difference between sex and gender, so when we talk of the difference between the two, we find that sex is the biological and gender is the social or social cultural construct. Further, sex is, you see, is a constant. It is ceaseless globally, everywhere in the world, wherever you go, then you'll find that sex has a definite meaning. It's a constant meaning, and the biological factors of men and women all over the world are the same. While in gender, the attitude, the expectations of, and the demands of the society, and the culture, that changes from place to place and the community to community. And in India itself, you see that ours is a very vast country and diversity is there. And gender, you see that the attitude, the expectations, the demands, and the various other things, culture, etc., that all is changing in our country. So gender is something which is related to socio-cultural construct, while sex is the biological construct. So difference in sex are made by the nature, and difference in gender are created by the society. We cannot change the sex, we change the gender. So when we talk about the determining of factors of the gender, then you can find it very clearly that their work, their roles and responsibilities are very much decided in the society. Men will go out for the work, women will do the domestic work. This is something which the role and responsibility has been assigned to the gender in our society. Similarly, if we talk about the dress, then you see that men will wear the different dresses, then women will wear some different dresses. Now, with the advancement, with the development in the society, we find that the women are also coming forward, and sometimes we see that there is no difference in the dressing sense of the men and women, but the society has assigned this dress also, that what the men will wear and what the women will wear. Then regarding the behavior and attitude also, this is also one of the determining factor, that this particular behavior and the attitude is of the male and the other is of that the female. Then regarding mobility, that they, whether the women are free to move in the society or there are certain restrictions or not, what places and what spaces they will be moving around, and what type of dreams even they are entitled to see and to perceive and to pursue for those dreams, what are their aspirations. These are also assigned in the society to the male and female gender. Access to healthcare, nutrition, food, many things, you see. Then when we talk about the access to healthcare, then you see just the data, that if there is some disease, if there's some health problem to a boy in the family, to the male member in the family, then a very good doctor and experts would be there, and for that the entire family would be there, that the disease may be cured. But if it's a case of the female, then you find that the access to healthcare is very very limited in the cases of the women. Similarly, the nutrition and the food also, access to various resources. These are all assigned and these are said to be the determining factor for the gender. I'm not talking in absolutism, but I'm talking in the majoritarianism. And you see that women have less access to productive resources, to the assets, to the decision making bodies, all these things. The women have less and less interference. They are not allowed to have an access to that. They are not being made the given the participation in the decision making also. So this is something which we find that this exists in the society, and these are the roles of the society which have been assigned to the male and female gender. And unequal power relations between the men and the women, the subordinated status for the women for making them vulnerable. You see that there are certain categories of the persons who are said to be vulnerable in human rights. Because in human rights law, we study that there are certain categories which are considered to be the vulnerable, and women is one of them. So why women is vulnerable? This is very important question. When the law provides the equality, when the justice is being provided, again women is vulnerable because she is not being treated equally in the society, and this is because of her gender. Then unequal treatment is given to her. She has been discriminated everywhere. Denial of the rights in education, health, inheritance, everywhere you find that some type of the discrimination is being faced by the this female gender. All forms of discrimination to maintain imbalance, like female feticide. If you see that with the advancement in science and technology, we find that sex determination can be done. Though that has been done with a very, very good way when this technology has been advanced and developed. That is to see whether the child in womb, whether is having any disease or not, something like that. But this has been misused. So we see that this discrimination has been there, and this is also making an imbalance in the society because of the female feticide. Further, you see the norms and expectations, behaviors, and roles of the men and women are prescribed in the society. So we see that though in today's scenario, we cannot say that these determinant factors are absolute, but we see that with the international and national socio-legal efforts, developments and empowerment of the women to some extent, I repeat, only to some extent, the work role, behavior, responsibility, attitude, that has changed or changing to bring the gender justice and equality, but we are not succeeding to get full equality or full justice. Internationally, we find that the United Nations has established strong mandates for gender justice and gender equality. It is known that gender equality and empowerment of women are essential for the eradication of not only the poverty and hunger, but also for the development that is truly sustainable. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action 1995, the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW, and the decade for women, that was from 1976 to 1985, and four world conferences on women. Those were convened between 1975 to 1995. All these at international level has come out with the efforts of the international, organizations to bring gender justice and gender equality. The mandate was just to establish the gender equality and to confer the gender justice. Then in 2015, one more thing that has been that has come out from the UN, that is Sustainable Development Goals. Those were adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015, and this Sustainable Development Goal has set out a 15-year plan to achieve the goals. There are 17 goals, and particularly I'm talking about the goal number 5. This goal number 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals is to achieve the gender equality and empowerment of all the women and girls by 2030. So after 2015, we see 6 years have been gone, and rest 9 years are there. In this period, we have to achieve the gender equality and to empower the women and to the girls. So, gender equality internationally, we find that it's a fundamental human right. When we talk, it's a human right, so it's available to everyone. So we see that all the efforts by United Nations that contributed significantly to raise the awareness and the commitment to gender equality and gender justice. But in reality, the desired results are not seen, and that's why we are here to speak on this gender justice and gender equality, because the things are from the very beginning. If we see the post independence era, particularly in India, then we find that in Vedic period, sir has very rightly named Gargi, and Gargi, Gosa, Maitreyi, they all were allowed to. That was one of the golden period in the development, advancement, and the status for the women concerned, you see. And they were allowed to go for the study, they were allowed to read the Vedas, they were allowed to go for the discussions or the religious discussions, they were all allowed for that. And these were the names who have seen the status of women during this Vedic era. But at the same time, we also know the Manu rules also in Manu Smriti, which speaks about that a woman can never be an independent woman, because at every stage she needs to be escorted by a male member, by father, by husband, or by son, whatever is there. So that was also one of the time. But after 7th century onwards, you see that with the advent of this Mughal Empire, and then Britishers came over, so some social evils started to develop, be it Parda Pratha, be it Sati Pratha, or like that. And during that time, various Raja Ram Mohan Rai and some others, they have also taken lead, so to give the justice to the women concerned. So this post-independence era was like that, and the women has seen the good status in the Vedic era, and after that the status has been deteriorated. But when we talk about the post-independence era, then we find that the constitution has been drafted and enforced for the citizens of the country. And before moving further to discuss the equality and justice as is given in the Constitution of India, one more thing which I would like to emphasize here, that is to know as to what is the importance of gender equity also. Because when I was going through the brochure, I could see that the topic is not gender justice and gender equality, it is gender justice and gender equity. So when we talk about the equity, then the term equity and equality, these are sometimes used interchangeably, which can lead to the confusion. Because while these concepts are related, there are also important distinctions between them, that equity and equality are not the same word. Equity is trying to understand and to giving the people what they need to enjoy full healthy lives, that is depending upon the needs of the person concerned. So equity is something which is based on the needs of the person, so that they may enjoy a full life, they may enjoy the healthy life, they may enjoy the benefits of the in the society. While equality that aims to ensure that everyone gets the same thing in order to enjoy the full healthy lives. So equity is different. It is based on the needs of the person, while equality speaks of the sameness, or the same thing is to be made available to all in the society. So like equity, equality aims to promote the fairness and justice, but it can only work if everyone starts from the same place and needs the same things. So far as our country is concerned, and otherwise also, we see that no two persons are same. And when we talk about the equality, which speaks of the same thing, then that equality would not result into justice, because we see that India is a very diverse country, and our beauty is that diversity in unity. We are having different culture, different religion, different languages, different things in the country. And if we go for the equality for all, then naturally it would be resulting into injustice to them. So, equity is something different to that of the equality. And if we need equality, then we have to go for some constructive equality. And that I'll be discussing regarding affirmative action and equality clause in the Constitution of India. So, gender equity means the fairness of the treatment for women and men according to their respective needs. They may include the equal treatment, or the treatment that is different, but which is considered equivalent in terms of the rights, in terms of the benefits which they are being given, or the obligations and the opportunities. This has also been said by in a definition given by the UNESCO regarding gender equity. So we can say that the gender equity is the process of being fair to men and women. Equity sets the stage for equality, because equity is the first step. And equity that sets the stage for equality, that if equality is the end goal, equity is the means to get there. And equity is used, for example, within the education, health, and humanitarian sectors, to bring up the equal distribution of resources. That is equity, which are based on the needs of the different groups of the persons. As I told you that in India we find this diversity, unity among diversity. So all this required to be customized on different treatment has to be given for that, and for that equity works, not equality. So, coming back to justice and equality, we find that the importance of the concept of equality and justice is known to many. But when these concepts are qualified with gender, that is to say, gender equality and gender justice, they are not considered very important in the society. Even there is no understanding of the essential linkages between gender equality with that of the empowerment of the women. If there will be gender equality, that will of course lead to the empowerment of women. So this link of the equality with empowerment of women, that is missing. Or gender equality with the progress of all other areas in all the issues. So as a result of this failure to address this gender inequality and gender injustices are devastating for women and the girls at a larger stage. And also, I should say, demoralizing them. The women are being demoralized because they are facing gender inequality and gender injustices. You see the serious levels of violence against women in domestic context as well as in other situations also. High levels of maternal mortality, it may be or because of inaccessible health services due to the lack of basic transport, which is unacceptable in the age of space travel. You may recall the cases in Odisha. Very recently, you see that the Odisha Human Rights Commission started a probe into a case of hospital workers in Balasore district in Karnataka. That is relating to the breaking a body at the hip, so that the male, that is the husband, that he can carry out that dead body in a bundle, and because the transportation was not allowed and it was not given by the hospital authorities. Similarly, in Kalahandi, a man had to wrap his wife's body in a cloth and walked to his home, that is around 60 kilometers from the district headquarters, because the hospital authorities were not providing a mortuary van or the ambulance. So this was the situation regarding the equality and inequality treatment for this purpose. And we see that maternal mortality rate is very, very high in India. Then lack of access to the basic needs of survival, like land, like property, economic resources, education, employment. So this accessibility is not allowed in various cases to the female gender. Then trafficking in women, it's a form of slavery, it's a form of torture, we should say, that is also prevalent. And most importantly, the underrepresentation, or we can say non-representation in all areas of decision making. So these are certain points where we find that equality is not meted out to the women. So the concept of gender justice and gender equality, that implies a comprehensive goal and the schemes of protecting the classes of subordinate gender from the exploitations and denials that are inflicted by the dominant gender. So I should not name here as to who are the dominating genders or who are the gender which are subordinate. Everybody knows about that, though the population or the percentage remains somewhere equal with this sex determination test, though the number or the ratio has been decreasing in every census, you see 927 against 1000. But still we find that the number is highly dominating, that is on the equality and justice matters when it is a case of the gender justice. Then gender justice, that means that women must exercise full participation in decision making process, that is in all walks of the life she has to have the participation right, that is gender justice. And she has to fully share all the opportunities with the men, that is the gender justice, so that they can find equitable and practical solutions to the issues in family and society. But the question is whether they are allowed to participate in all these decision making bodies or decision making, not even in their own home, leave the other things. So gender justice that deviates from stereotyping of women's traditional role as determined by the men, that is the meaning of the gender justice. So that stereotyping women traditional role is still prevalent in the vast society, in our society like India. And that promotes that gender justice, which speaks about the change in the stereotyping traditional role, and to promote a philosophy that regards all people as essential agents of the change, so that all people, those people are only considered to be the male and not the female gender. So it views the development as a process. Gender justice, it views the development as a process for enlarging the choices for both the sexes, that is there. And this gender justice also believes that women are the rights bearing autonomous human beings without difference from men. So these are the ideals, we can say, which speaks about the gender justice. But when we see in practice whether these ideal norms are being followed or not, then it speaks the entire story, and we find that gender justice is not being made available in our country. I would like to quote one of the statement that was given by Marian Young, that related to this gender justice, when she says that gender is an aspect of social justice. Gender is an aspect of social justice, which essentially means elimination of the institutionalized domination and oppression. Now, as I told you, that gender is a social construct and it's an institutionalized thing. So, the very definition of gender justice, as told by Marian Young, is that it is an aspect of the social justice. Gender justice cannot survive alone. It has to be in the social justice, which is essentially to eliminate the institutionalized domination and oppression. So the oppression against women can be seen through various ways. Exploitation is there. She has been marginalized. She has been made powerless, and the cultural imperialism or domination is always there. And finally, we see the violence is one of the greatest factor, which is not granting that justice and equality to the gender which they have to be. And so, what are the measures at national level to ensure gender justice? We need to discuss the Suprema Lex, that is the Constitution of India, and that speaks about the gender justice in the constitutional framework. So, as I told you, that besides the international conventions and treaties, be it CEDAW, be it ICPD program action, or Beijing platform for action, then the constitutional and legal framework at national level also focuses on the gender justice and equality. So, starting with the very preamble to the Constitution of India, when it says that we, the people of India, so we see that this we word has been providing the full justice to every gender, because it is not discriminating that it's only for men or it's only for women, because we include everyone. And that's why the very first word of the preamble that confers the gender justice in this constitutional framework, that it comes from the preamble to the Constitution of India. And equality of status and equal opportunity to all the citizens. So again, it is the citizens, and citizens is a male and a female both. So equality of status and equal opportunity to all the citizens, that is also to be ensured in the preamble to the Constitution of India. Besides that, social, economic, and political justice to all the citizens, that has been given to all the citizens by this preamble, that has been ensured. And promoting dignity. When we talk about the gender injustice, gender inequality, that is somehow bringing indignity to the women. And the preamble to the Constitution speaks about promoting the dignity of the individual. It speaks about the dignity of individual, that individual includes everyone. Then moving further, if we see the Constitution part third, that is related to the fundamental rights, then we find that equality before law and equal protection of the laws are there under Article 14, and there is a prohibition for discrimination on the basis of sex, all citizens to lead a life with dignity, and the states have to take affirmative action and protective discrimination to alleviate the women from exclusion in politics, in education, and in public employment. And then you see the part fourth of the Constitution, which speaks of the directive principles of the state policy, that also confers obligation on the state, particularly equal pay for equal work and just and human conditions of work. So you see that when we talk about the just and human conditions of work, that is related to the maternity benefits also. And in that way, you find that for working women, there are certain provisions regarding maternity leave and the child care leaves also. And this is for the women, that they may continue with their employment, they may continue with their work. But these maternity benefit leaves and child care leaves somehow becoming some hindrance in the opportunity in employment from the very beginning. Yes, in the morning session, I was discussing with that also, that from the very beginning stage, these are considered, or these are, doing as a restriction on the women employment, this maternity benefit and childcare, because the dominance of the male members in the selection committees and the selection boards, and there this question inevitably comes, that avoid, if it is possible, to take the women as in the employment, because after employment they will go for leaves, child care leaves, maternity benefit leaves, and so many other leaves, so work will hamper. So you see that it is that just and human conditions of work and maternity benefit, these are working as hindering the opportunity in employment for the women and leading to gender injustice and gender inequality. Nobody knows about that, because these are the things which are not coming outside the boardroom. Then, regarding Part 4A of the Constitution, which speaks of the fundamental duties, and there is a duty of every citizen to renounce the practices derogatory against the women. You see that Article 15, Clause 3, that is very, very specific article which speaks of the gender equality, or considering that women are the weaker sections in the society, to provide certain extra provision, or to make certain special provisions, so that they may be brought in the mainstream in the society. And 15.3, that is related to the affirmative action, or affirmative discrimination in favor of the women. And it speaks simply that the state has to make some special provisions for the women and children. Article 14 is a general clause which speaks of the equality before law and equal protection of law. 15 clause 1 speaks of that there shall not be any discrimination on the ground of sex alone. Similarly, Article 16 also speaks that there shall not be any discrimination on the ground of sex, and equal opportunity shall be given in matters of employment. Then, very recently, when this Sabrimala judgment was being delivered by the Supreme Court, you see Article 17. Article 17 basically it speaks about the untouchability, abolition of the untouchability. And we were all aware about that this untouchability was in the sense of that we were having a great caste system in the society. The persons from belonging to that weaker section, they were not allowed to go for certain places, public places or wells or something like that. So for that purpose, this Article 17 has been brought into the fundamental rights chapter, that is abolition of untouchability, so that all should be brought in the mainstream. But this abolition of untouchability that was prevalent in the society in the name of caste, but whether anyone thought of this untouchability with reference to the women in the age group of 10 to 50? The menstruating age group women cannot enter the temple, Sabrimala case that was there, and the decision has come out to give the gender justice and gender equality. And considering that this women, they were considered to be untouchable, they cannot enter the temple even. So this was there. This is again another, we can say, interpretation of Article 17 with reference to the untouchability, with reference to the female. Then Article 19(1)(g), that is again a fundamental right that is available to all the citizens, which speaks of the right to practice any profession, or to carry on any occupation, trade or business, etc. That also brought certain inequality. And again, you see the court has to interfere with, particularly in that Bishakha judgment, that equality in employment, and that can be seriously hampered and impaired rather, when the women are subjected to gender specific violence. Because I told you that gender justice, that is being attacked by the violences also, such as the sexual harassment in workplaces. So this 19(1)(g) could not be exercised by the women. If they are being faced sexual harassment at workplace, they will not go to work. They cannot enjoy their right to carry on this practice, profession or occupation or trade or business. Then Article 21, that is right to life and personal liberty, that includes dignity also. So that is also available to the women. And what type of dignity you find that the women are having in the society? The women are being raped, they are molested, they are out, their modesty has been outraged in the society, on the road, they have been killed. So what type of dignity Article 21 speaks about? We have to see that whether it is for providing justice or not. Then Article 21A speaks about the right to education and education for all. But you see the rate of the dropout rate of the girl child from the very beginning, that is on a larger side, though right to education is available to everyone. Trafficking in human being, that is also there, Article 23. Then when we talk about Article 243D and T, that is related to the women participation or women reservation in the panchayats and nagar palikas, that is reserved for the women by 73rd and 74th Amendment 1992. You see 33% reservation has been made for women in this panchayati Raj system. So the provisions in the constitution, we find that there are much provisions which are for the upliftment of the women, for giving the justice to the women, for bringing the equality for the women. But the question here is that women could achieve what is granted in the constitution, leave other legislations, because there are plethora of legislations which speaks about the women rights, domestic violence, dowry prohibition, then prenatal sex determination. So many acts are there which speaks about the gender justice and gender equality. But the very constitution which confers all these rights on the women, all these provisions are there. And whether this could be achieved, this which have been guaranteed by the constitution, this is one of the questions when we talk about the gender justice. So we have not been able to implement the constitutional directives as the constitution provides for the gender equality. You see that the fascination for the male child and the phobia for a female child is irrationally perceived as a burden. People, they resort to any means for eliminating the female fetus while systematically selecting for male fetus. And as a result of this preference for the male child, which is rampant in the society, the feticide after sex determination are also taking place in the society. And this has become a cause of concern for the survival of the girl child. We see that nearly 60% of the girls in India drop out due to the lack of toilets in the schools and other restrictions at home. They are not allowed to go out of their home. The right to development as a whole has been stopped at the home. And it is important to impart the education and provide exposure to the women in India for their development, because you see in 1989 United Nations Charter that has provided certain rights, the basic rights for the girl child and for the women: right to survival, right to protection, right to participation, and right to development. So when we talk about this survival right, then this female feticide is there, and the girls are not being allowed to born, even if because of this technology, the sex determination is there because of the preference which are being given, or the fascination for the male child that is there. So girls are not being allowed to survive even, and this is one of the right for the right to survival. So if there would be no survival of the girl child, what type of gender justice and gender equality will be talking about? Because if there would be no one to get this gender justice and gender equality, then the entire discourse would be useless. So this right to survival is very, very important for that purpose. Then similarly, when we talk about the right to development, then if the girl child, if she is allowed to be born, then you see that the dropout rate is very, very high for the girl child. And it is important to impart the education and to provide the exposure to the women in India for their development, because without that exposure they cannot develop themselves. So in a gender justice society, I'm talking about a gender justice society, providing economic and political equality is equally important to enjoy the right of participation. And that is another right which has been talked about by United Nations Charter in 1989. And finally, when we talk about the dignity and the very soul of the women is dependent on the pent up emotions of the men, whether at home or outside the home. A woman is not safe. She needs protection against various crimes, against various offenses which are being committed against her. Earlier, you see that the women who were raped, they could and they go to the court of law. But now you see that the rapes are also included with the murders also. They are not being allowed to go to get the justice even. And gender equality has become a distant concept in India. Moreover, the judiciary is trying to bring gender justice and gender equality through its decision, be it Nargesh Mirza case, where the discrimination or unreasonable provisions were there to the motherhood, that the women who is in her first pregnancy, that this the air hostesses, they'll be sacked from the services. So these type of the provisions were there in an independent country like India, which is said to be the motherland from this Vedic period for the women's rights. Then Vishakha case, the sexual harassment case, and Chandrima Das, then Geeta Hariharan case regarding the rights of the mothers. So everything has to be done by the mother. The birth has to be given by the mother, by the women, and the father should be the guardian. This is the law. So you see, the male chauvinism or male mentality or male domination is also seen in the legislations also. Everywhere you see that it speaks about the male domination. If you go for the rape cases, if you go for the other types of the crimes under IPC, you see that it speaks from the side of the male rather than the women. So we see that the judiciary to some extent has tried to come out from that inequalities by giving certain good decisions. Lata Singh was there, Nirbhaya, then very recently in 2020, Babita Punia, the commission in army, and this Vinita Sharma judgment that is related to the daughter's right in the property, Shaira Bano judgment, and many more cases are there. There are various instances where the judiciary has come forward to read into the provisions which upheld the justice and equality. But there are instances which again show the very face of the gender dominated society. Very recently on 1st March 2021, you see that there was one case reported in media, Mohit Subhash Chavan versus State of Maharashtra and another. That was the statement of the Chief Justice of India, none other than the Chief Justice of India, S.A. Bobde, when he asked the government servant Mohit Subhash Chavan, who was involved in a case of the rape, and his bail was denied from the this High Court of Mumbai. So Chief Justice of India asked the government servant whether he was ready to marry the woman who has accused him of rape. And during the hearing, this Chief Justice Bobde asked Chavan's liar, will you marry her? So, one of the very noted lawyer and advocate, Brinda Grover, she has written about what Chief Justice of India has written, deeply troubled and angry also. Though not shocked, because these type of the things are coming from the judiciary also. Any person believing in equality and dignity of women, the rights of the girl and a woman over her own body, over her own soul, over the sexual autonomy, and the right to self determination over their own lives and futures, that will be enriched. This is what she has written in her column at Facebook, Brinda Grover, against Justice Chief Justice of India S.A. Bobde's statement, and that is really very very shocking for all the women, that we are thinking that the fountain of justice, that is the apex court, the Supreme Court of India, which has delivered the judgments like Nargesh Mirja, Vishakha, and Geeta Hariharan like judgment, that Supreme Court of India, Chief Justice of the India, that is speaking like that. And this is not only the one example. Mohit Subhash Chavan is not only the only example. Another case also, Vinay Pratap Singh versus State of UP, in this week only. That was again reported in media, and again the CGI asked that if a couple is living together as man and wife, the husbands may be a brutal man, but can you call the act of sexual intercourse between a lawfully wedded man and his wife as rape? So you see that if this type of the mentality is coming from the Chief Justice of India, what type of gender justice we can we can seek for. And this comment is not only legitimizes any kind of sexual, physical, and mental violence by the husband, but it normalizes the torture and Indian women have been facing within marriages for years without any legal recourse. It is not the job of the court. There was one article published that this is not the job of the court to arrange the compromise marriages of rape survivors. And here I am recalling one of the judgment which was given by Justice Krishna Iyer. It was somewhere in 1982, Krishna Lal versus State of Haryana, when he said that one sensitized judge is a far, far better armor against the gender outrage than the long clauses of sections with all the protections written into it. Now, he spoke about the sensitized judge, and he was of the opinion that a sensitized judge could save and could deliver the gender justice and could deliver the gender equality, and the laws could not be helpful if there is no law in the name of complete justice. The judge could see that the gender justice is required or gender equality is required. But on the other hand, this 1982 judgment of Justice Krishna Iyer and what Chief Justice of India, Justice Bobde, has done, we can make a difference. That what type of the mentality in the society is now oozing out to against the women, against the gender, against the justice and equality rights of the women. And finally, on this International Women Day, I would say that giving only one day out of 365, we all know that in a year there are 365 days. So, giving only one day out of these 365 days to mark the occasion would not lead to either equity or justice. Every day is a Women Day. I wish every day is a Women Day and every day is for the women. She is the birth giver. She is the human being, and supporting the achievements of the women should be a daily responsibility to ensure equality and justice. Because we know that there is no life without women. Women shape the world. Without women, there would be no human species. This is an awesome fact, and I say none can deny this. It's amazing to be a woman. It is the time we all start believing in how amazing we are. We are not the weaker sections. We are not the uh, weaker sex. We are not the second sex. We are not the fair sex as it is written in the dictionaries, as it is used for the women. We are the softer sex by nature. We are softer sex by nature. We are not second sex. We are not weaker sex. We can do what the others cannot do because we are the birth giver. We are the creator. So we need that justice. We need that opportunity, because without opportunity, the things would not be on a proper line. And this is how I would justify that gender justice and gender equality, that is missing in our country to some extent, though with the development, with the participation of women at various level, due to some we can say development in the educational position of the women, no, everything. We find that the women is achieving to certain levels, but those are only few. Because in today's newspaper, while I was going through, then could see that some names of the women scientists, academicians, doctors, and police officers, those all were there, and that they have done this, they have done this, they have done this. But in a big society, in a big population, can we say that numbering those women on tips only would be suffice to give them justice and equality? I say it is not. And for that, we, the women, have to work. We have to come forward. We have to seek those opportunities. We have to seek those opportunities whereby we can have or get the justice, we can get the equality in the society. Equality doesn't mean the sameness. Equality means the same platform which can be made available to everyone. So, with these words, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my views on this gender justice and gender equity. And once again, I would like to congratulate for organizing the webinar on this International Women's Day. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful session. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your knowledge